Sanguinary Guard. Glorious golden angel soaring above the battlefield, juxtaposed by the sheer bloodlust and carnage left in their wake. These guys are the elite of the elite of the elite of the Blood Angels. They're made distinctly noticeable by their golden armor, which denotes their rank and status amongst the Blood Angels. They're also characterized by their golden death masks and abs and pecs, which they have for some reason. They normally have white wings too, but I don't put them on my models because they're a pain in the arse to carry around. Every time I rock up for a game of 40k and take my Sanguinary Guard out of the box, there's usually a couple of wings in the bottom of the box and I have to glue them back on, and I just thought, it, I don't need them. And they've already got the cool jump pack anyway, so you don't really need them. I love using these guys in 40k and I wanted them to really stand out in the battlefield, so I shopped around for some chrome spray paint and I managed to find this one here, which was in Bunnings, and it's pretty cheap. I'll put a link in the description so you can find it for yourself. You might be able to find the equivalent in your own country. I'm pretty sure White Knight's an American brand anyway. But there's just a few little things you need to know with this paint. A, it's pretty hydrophobic, so it's quite painful with the paint. As you'll see, you have to do lots of layers of washes and things like that. But the end result, I think, is pretty awesome. So watch this video, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you soon.
Made these bases with leftover bits from the Ruins box from Games Workshop. And to make these models look like they were flying, I drilled little holes in the back sides and on the top of the base and stuck a paperclip in between there. Now this can be a disadvantage when you're playing Warhammer, but just take that into consideration when you choose the length of your paperclips. And these are the sprays we're going to use to base coat these models. First one is the trusty Rust-Oleum Flat Black, then we've got the Games Workshop Corax White, which is pretty expensive, but it does the job. It's pretty good white paint, and the good old Super Gold from White Knight. And I know everyone likes to have a dig at Games Workshop's prices, but the black and the gold paint probably cost about the same as that white paint there. And I'm going to start them all off in black. This is so it gives the gold a nice surface to attach to. I haven't tried this on bare plastic, but I don't really think it would turn out that well, so I'm going to start with the black. And this little block I'm using is a block of florist foam. These cost about $1 each, and they're super useful when you've got paper clips to hold your models. You can just stab it straight in there when you're ready to put it down. Now I do get quite nervous when I use this gold because I don't know how much I could fuck it up, but I found controlled little bursts is the best way to apply this paint. And having the black undercoat is going to help you avoid applying too much of this paint when you're trying to touch up little bits, because the black's just going to make it look like a shadow and it kind of makes it look cool. Now they're looking pretty damn shiny, but I'm going to bring it down just a little bit with some wash. I'm going to be using Reikland Flesh Shade to shade this gold because I want to retain a little bit of warmth in there. One thing you'll notice straight away when painting onto this gold is that it's very hydrophobic, so the paint's not going to absorb like it does with a normal acrylic base. So the trick is to kind of push and pull it around into all the recesses, and then do multiple little thin coats on the flatter parts if you want to dull it down a little bit. And this is going to result in a more matte finish which comes from the wash, and this is going to be very useful when it comes to doing your next colours because it's going to give the paint a nice surface to adhere to. Now I'm going to start off with this Vallejo gunmetal, and I'm going to do all the undersuit and the gun casing. Another thing that you'll notice is that you will definitely need to do 2 coats of every colour on this model. Even with the wash we did before, it is still slightly hydrophobic. And moving up in the shades of metallics, I'm using Vallejo Exhaust Manifold, and I'm going to do the ammo box and the end of the barrel tip. And I do love these Sanguinary Guard wrist mounted bolt guns, they're pretty awesome. They can shoot people while they're chopping them into bits with a giant 2-handed sword. And that's pretty metal, as you'd come to expect from 40k. And next in the metallic food chain, it's Duraluminum. And I'm using this on all the hard edges of the ammo box. And I'm using this to give it a little bit of definition against the gold. Now I've still got a lot to learn about art theory and how light works and interacts with objects, but just even trying edge highlighting is a good start. And that's where you'll really start to improve as a miniature painter. Now I'm going to start making the white parts, and this is my favourite recipe to do white feathers because I do a lot of Blood Angels. And I start with Mechanica Standard Grey, and I just block in all the areas that I want to be white. Starting with a darker grey just helps deal with a lot of the kerfuffle that's involved in painting white. If you try and do white over another colour, it's going to look really streaky and you're going to have to do a million coats. If you start like this, you'll see how easy it can be. And once I'm satisfied with my 2 coats, I'm going to move on to the next base colour and come back to washing and highlighting these wings. For all the bits of parchment, I'm going to start with Sanguinary dust. And this is my go-to for doing things like purity seals and scrolls and things like that. Sometimes I like to mix it up a bit and start with a Rakarth flesh base, but the Sanguinary dust is a nice dark starting point. For all the seals, I'm going to start with Mephiston red. Probably the most used paint in my collection. It's definitely the one that I've bought the most pots of, but it is a really nice vibrant red compared to some other brands. And this is pretty much the cornerstone of my Blood Angels army. And I'm also going to use this paint to block in the iconography on the shoulder pads. And we're not going to worry about the jeweled blood drops that appear over this armour for now. We're going to do something a bit different with those using this gold underneath. These Encarmine swords are also power weapons, so I'm going to start with Cantor Blue as the first step for a plasma lightning glow. Now go nice and thin with this paint because it's quite a large flat surface and you want to get it nice and smooth. Now that's it for all the base colours. I'm going to start washing it, and I'm going to start with Agrax Earthshade, and this is essentially just for all the parchment and scroll work. Now we move on to Nuln Oil for all the gun parts. And the next step for the white wings is a blue shade. And this is going to work really well with the white highlights because it's going to be a nice bluey kind of shadow, which is a lot more interesting than a black and white contrast in my opinion. And continuing on with the wings, I'm going to use Celestra Grey, which is a medium grey, and what I'm going to do is pick out the bottom 90% of each of the feathers. I quite enjoy painting these wings even though they are quite laborious. But I see it as a mindfulness exercise. Just picking out each individual wing is surprisingly therapeutic. And it's a good chance just to concentrate on one thing for a change. This is why I think it's important to get yourself a hobby. Most of our lives are pretty stressful and we don't get many opportunities to focus on one thing. So yeah, this is an important part of life in my opinion. Now we're going to go the lighter colour with this Ulthagr, otherwise known as Ulthuan Grey, and this is going to go on the bottom 60% of each feather, or roughly thereabouts. You know, I'm not expecting to measure each one, but I'm sure you can roughly guess around 60%. And make sure you highlight the borders and the top edges of these wings as well. And now we come to pure white, and we're just going to do a little streak along the bottom of each one, and a little thin line around all the borders as well. And as you can see, all those mixtures of greys and blues gives you a nice definition between each of the feathers. And next to highlight all the parchment, I'm using a Shabti bone, and I'm just going to pick out all the edges of these bits of scroll work. And you can pick out all the little tears and imperfections in them as well with this highlight. And with the purity seals, what I like to do is just highlight the edges and then pick out the raised waves that are on the parchments. And a bit later in the video, I'll show you how to do some super easy miniature calligraphy. Now I'm going to pick out all the reds with Evil Sun Scarlet, and I'm going to start with the wax seals that are above the purity seals on the armor. Generally I just like to pick out the edges of these wax seals, but some of them have either a little symbol in the middle of them, and sometimes you can reach it quite easily with a brush, so you can just pick out that with a little dab of this red. And I forgot to record where I was painting the start of these blood vials, but if you go and look at my Eldar video and watch how I paint the gemstones, it's pretty much the same process but with red. And with the blood drop on the shoulder pad, I'm going to start going around the right hand edge of the teardrop on the top and bottom with quite a thick line of this Evil Sun Scarlet. And then when we go in with our next red, we're going to go a bit thinner and more precise on the edge of that blood drop. Now for the power sword, I'm coming in with Calgar Blue, and I'm going to do quite a thick line halfway up the blade and then mirror it on the other side, as you can see now. Coming from the opposite side of the sword and going from the middle to the top. And then I'm going to drag a few thin lines down the edge of the blade to make it blend in a little bit more. And then what I'm going to do is just grab a little bit of water on my brush and start blending in those colors. Basically just dab around and move the paint around so it doesn't look as uniform. And you can keep coming back and forth to it, adding little bits of highlight just to make it look a little bit more natural. And every so often I'll just go back and refresh the edge of the blade with a nice streak of the lighter color. Now I've mixed about 50% white into this Calgar blue, and I'm just going to start tracing all these little lightning bolts and picking out all the little, whatever these things are, little lightning rod things that are on the swords. I assume this has got something to do with where the energy is coming from on this sword. So I think they should be pretty bright. And then I'm just going to start doing little squiggly lines as lightning bolts. And if you've seen my Night Lords video, this is pretty much the same process. With the light blue you do a slightly thicker line, and then as you come up to pure white the line gets thinner and thinner and goes in the middle of the existing lines. And as I said, the final step is to come in with pure white and do the thinnest line you can in between the existing blue lines. And this is going to make the lightning bolts look a lot more vivid. And now the last of our red triad, it's the Wild Rider red. And I'm just going to pick out the harshest edges on the wax seals, the blood drop on the shoulder pad, and the little blood vials. Now for all the gemstones I'm using Spirit Stone red, and this really stands out with this shiny chrome gold. And this is one of the few paints that you can use straight out of the pot. And what I like to do is take a small dab on the end of my brush and just place it where I want it, and then start moving it around into the shape that I want. You can't really paint it like standard paint, so you have to treat it a little bit differently. Now I do really like the look of manually painted matte gemstones, but I just wanted to see what this looked like on this model, and I quite like it. And this chrome gold gives it a real big boon in its shine. And now for the teeny tiny calligraphy, I've got a little cheat. This 0.3mm pen, and very lightly and gently I'm going to start drawing little tiny squiggly lines on the model. And this is going to represent text, which obviously is very difficult to do at this scale, so you can get away with the squiggly line, no one's going to be able to read it anyway. If you go on Google Images and look up medieval manuscripts, you can get some really good inspiration for what to do on these bits of parchment. Basically what I like to do is start with a little square at the top of where the sentence is going to be, and do the impression of a letter in the middle, and on the blood angels I usually just draw a little tiny blood drop on the bottom of each. On the larger areas of parchment I like to try and do words, and what I tend to do is do the first letter at the start and the end letter at the end, and then try and fill in the bits in the middle. That way you can try and gauge if you're going to have enough space. Now I chose the word sacrifice for this shoulder pad, which is probably a mistake because it's quite a long word. Usually what I do is just go on Google Translate and look up the Latin translations for any words that are associated with the chapter that you're painting. And on the chest I went with morte, which is Latin for death. And here are the super shiny Smash Boys. Now this is 9 Sanguinary Guard and 1 Sanguinary Ancient, and I've just got to do a little bit of rewriting on my list, and I'm going to pop these in somewhere.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, just give the subscribe and like button a bit of a tickle, and I'll see you back here in a fortnight. Thank you.